Let's have a look at some vehicle designations. Designations can be by vehicle width or class. It may include almost any subdivision of vehicles, including motorcycle, ATV, UTV ROV, and 4x4. We recommend using vehicle width as the primary factor because it's easily measured in the field. It provides consistency for vehicle type, even though state definitions may be different. It also allows the industry to adapt to the various designations. If your trail is designed to handle a vehicle that is 50 inches wide, it really should not make any difference how the people ride on the vehicle. Designations may also be by time of year. The rule requires that the Forest Service designate when roads, trails, and areas are open for use. This is different from past practices, which set seasonal closures. There are some exemptions from the requirement to stay on designated routes. Those include aircraft and watercraft. Over snow vehicles, see 212.81. Limited administrative use by the USFS. Fire, military, emergency, and law enforcement vehicles for emergency purposes. Authorized use of combat or combat support vehicles for national defense purposes. Law enforcement response to violation of laws, including pursuit. This clears up an issue that had been interpreted differently by different Forest Service offices. Some offices required their enforcement personnel to keep their vehicles on only designated routes, which meant that even though they had good reason to believe that someone was on a closed route, they could not drive in to catch them. This part of the rule clears up that confusion. The exemptions also include use specifically authorized under a written authorization issued under federal law or regulation. This may include any number of uses, from mineral exploration to range management. For example, a grazing permittee may be authorized to use routes not designated for public use to access his grazing facilities. They can also be allowed to travel cross-country on an ATV to round up cattle. We do not advocate the allowance of cross-country use for cattle management because it leaves tracks on the landscape. This can lead to further confusion for the recreational rider and could result in use of non-designated routes. The rule clearly requires that the public be allowed to participate in the designation process. If you have any desire to influence the route designation decisions, it is critical that you participate in the public processes. This is true for the initial designation as well as any further reviews that may add or eliminate routes. If there are no proposed changes in a system that is currently designated for motorized vehicle use, then the only requirement is that the public receive notice of the action under the rule. The rule also requires coordination with federal, state, county, local, and tribal governments. This may provide riders with an additional way to influence the ultimate decision. By working closely with your elected officials to generate their support for a quality system of sustainable trails, you can further strengthen your case for trails. Quality trail systems can have substantial positive benefits on many rural communities. These can include economic benefits as well as quality of life. The Forest Service has the option of changing designations as necessary. This can include adding new routes or eliminating routes that are not working. As a rider, you need to continue working with the agency to let them know what changes are needed in the existing system. Any proposed changes must include public involvement and coordination with appropriate governmental entities. As an interested rider, you must be involved in each and every process. The rule still allows emergency closures to respond to unforeseen emergencies. The time restriction in the previous regulations has been relaxed. This makes it more important for the riders to track the use of emergency closures to make sure they are lifted when the emergency has been solved. When the Forest Service does its analysis of route designations, there are three categories of criteria that must be considered. These are general, specific for trails and areas, and specific for roads. The general criteria state that any route corridor must be surveyed for archaeological or historical features and must be cleared before any ground-disturbing activities can occur. The Forest Service is not allowed by law to make the actual locations of sites available to the public. Public safety may be cited as a reason to restrict some routes. As riders, we need to ask for specific accident statistics and the rationale. We also need to look at modifying uses or behaviors that may be considered safety issues. The ability to provide recreation opportunities needs to be considered. This must include motorized and non-motorized opportunities. Providing public access to public lands is important criteria that must be evaluated. As riders, we need to ensure that our comments reflect the access needs for all motorized users, while at the same time recognizing that others also use the forest. Because conflicts among uses must also be reviewed and considered. If we work to understand the needs of other uses, we're better able to modify our own use to reduce or eliminate these conflicts. The costs of developing, maintaining, and managing use must be calculated. There needs to be a reasonable expectation that the necessary resources can be found to do the necessary work. This puts the ball firmly in the rider's court. There is little expectation that the Forest Service budget will ever be sufficient enough to fund all the necessary work with appropriated funds. This will require the riders to step up and find ways to ensure management work is done. You can also develop or support a state registration program to provide funding. And you can develop a well-organized volunteer force to take on much of the management work.